Pastor Doug here from Crossroads. It's great to be with you. I hope that today's message will draw you closer to Jesus.
In the early 90s comedy classic, What About Bob? Bill Murray plays Bob. And Bob is, he has a lot of problems. Bob has so many fears and so many anxieties. He's almost an entirely crippled individual. He doesn't love germs, so he won't even touch doorknobs and barely goes outside. He can't get in elevators because they're close spaces, so he constantly has to take stairs despite the fact he lives in a major city. He has no friends, he has no relationships, no connections whatsoever. He's basically not a functional person. And so when he finally connects with his new therapist, he sees hope. Unfortunately, for the therapist, he goes on vacation. The therapist goes on vacation, and Bob doesn't know what to do. And Bob can't handle it. So Bob tracks down his therapist on vacation, begging to be treated. In the famous scene where he goes, gimme, 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 I need, in only the way Bill Murray can deliver it. So, in one final attempt from his therapist, played by Richard Dreyfuss, to get rid of Bob and restore sanity to his vacation, he meets with Bob. He says, Bob, I cannot meet with you. I am on vacation. And he takes out his prescription pad and he writes something down and hands it to Bob. He said, Bob, I want you to read this. Bob said, take a vacation from my problems? Yes, Bob, take a vacation from your problems. Anytime something comes up, any of those worries, fears, anxieties comes up, just read that script. Take a vacation from your problems. Now, might seem a little gimmicky advice, but Bob actually takes it to heart. And Bob begins to follow the advice. Bob begins to slowly change. He begins to find health. He begins to find freedom and connection. And he becomes the person he's supposed to be. Doesn't work out real well for his therapist, but it works out great for Bob. And it's interesting because even though the advice seems gimmicky, it worked for Bob because it's rooted in an interesting understanding of the concept of vacation. Vacation kind of inherently means giving up or taking a break from the ordinary, the daily routines, to do something new and something different. It gives us time and space for what we haven't had time and space for in our lives. Things like relaxation, reading, fun, family. So last week was the first official week of summer. So I want to ask you, how are you coming into the summer? How are you coming to summer? How do you feel? Are you eager? Are you excited? Are you stressed out? Are you worn out? Are you anxious? How are you as the summer approaches? Whatever you're currently at, what if this summer we didn't just take a vacation from work or a vacation from school? What if, like Bob, we took a vacation from some of the things that are holding us back? What if we took a vacation from some of the things holding us back? So that's what we're going to be doing for the next few weeks. We're going to encourage you to take a vacation from 4 specific things that might be weighing you down, that might be preventing you from connecting with others and with God, and from you experiencing God this summer. So that's where we're headed the next few weeks. And the first thing I want us to take a vacation from is we're going to take a vacation from expectations. We're going to take a vacation from expectations. So what expectations do you come with as we start summer? What expectations are you carrying with you? Are there projects you want to get done? Are there trips you're trying to take? Are there different household things you want to do? Something else entirely? What are your expectations? Now, having expectations, have you ever had your summer expectations not pan out the way you thought they would? Have you had all those desires, all that excitement, only to have it fizzle? When I was 14, my family took a vacation to California. And as part of that vacation to California, one of the things we were most excited about was going to Disneyland. None of us had ever been to a Disney theme park before. And so we were real excited. We had all the rides mapped out, all the things we wanted to do. We were looking forward to this incredibly. And then when we got there, one of the first rides that we went on was one my dad and I wanted to ride, and my mom and my brother didn't. So we said, okay, we'll meet you at the exit. We rode the ride. We come out to the exit. My dad and I are looking around. We don't see my brother and my mom. We don't see them anywhere. So we're like, all right, where could they be? We start wandering around. We're looking all over the place. We can't find them. Can't find them anywhere. So we sit and we wait. Maybe they'll find us. We wait for a while. Nothing. So one of us goes walking around the entire footprint of the ride. It was a big ride, so that a big footprint. And nothing. So we thought, well, maybe they rode their own ride and are going to come back and meet us. So we sat there and waited. Of course, this was the pre-cell phone days. All this could have been fixed just with a cell phone call now. But that was not the era we were in. So we had no idea what to do. It just kept going on and on. Like, obviously, they're not around. We can't just sit here forever. So finally, like, what are we going to do? We went to like the customer service, like lost child, like section. And we like left a note, meet us here for dinner if you come and check this. And then we're like, I guess we just kind of go keep riding stuff. And so we rode a few more rides, but we weren't really that excited anymore. We weren't really having a good time. We were just kind of worried about where our other family members were. And then finally, when we did meet up with them at the place we said for dinner, they were doing the exact same thing. It turns out the ride had 2 exits. We had no idea. They were waiting at the whole other exit, and they did basically the exact same thing we did, just in the opposite sides. And we just, for whatever reason, never connected the whole day. So what was supposed to be, what we expected to be an incredible day, a magical, fun day, turned into a day of worry and frustration. Not at all what we had planned. So how do we feel when our expectations don't get met? Frustrated, upset, disappointed, let down. Why are unmet expectations so painful? Why are they so painful? Well, when our expectations die, something else dies. That story in our minds, the way it was supposed to go. It's not just a hope for an outcome. We've attached ourselves to a future. And when that future doesn't happen, we lose not just a plan, we lose something that we were counting on. Sometimes the deepest disappointments aren't about what happened. They're about what didn't happen. And that's why unmet expectations can leave us so frustrated, angry, confused, grieving. And if you've ever experienced that in your life, then you know exactly how 2 followers of Jesus felt on the very first Easter Sunday. So we're going to be in Luke chapter 24. And we're going to be looking at a story here. It's the day of the resurrection, and there's 2 followers of Jesus who don't know what to do. Everything they thought Jesus was going to do had fallen apart. Their expectations had died. And they were leaving Jerusalem and walking on the road to a village called Emmaus. And we'll pick it up there in verse 13. Now that same day, 2 of them were going to a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened, all the events surrounding Jesus' death. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them, but they were kept from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing together as you walk along?" Have you ever had one of those moments where you're talking about somebody and that person shows up? That gets a little bit awkward. Only in this time, they didn't know it was Jesus. They didn't recognize that it was him. They had no idea. Why? Why didn't they recognize Jesus? Well, I mean, it's very possible that God temporarily prevented them from recognizing who he was in that moment. But I also think Luke is inviting us to notice something a little bit deeper. I've seen a number of these videos recently where it's celebrities filming themselves not being recognized. There was a fun one where Rainn Wilson, who played Dwight from The Office, recorded a video of himself sitting next to someone on an airplane who was watching The Office. And the guy had no idea that one of the main characters was sitting right next to him in the seat next to him. No idea. Or recently, before one of Jennifer Lawrence's movies, they sent her out to do man on the street interviews, asking people if they could name 5 Jennifer Lawrence movies and asking people about Jennifer Lawrence. Nobody recognized her. Even after they were literally being prompted to think about Jennifer Lawrence, they did not recognize her. Now, I don't think these people were blind, but I think they didn't recognize them because they weren't expecting them to be there. They weren't expecting to recognize them. Who expects to be sitting next to a celebrity on a plane? Who expects a celebrity to be out on the street interviewing people? Sometimes our expectations become so powerful that they actually blind us to what's right in front of us. They blind us to what's right in front of us. And I think that's also what's happening here is expectation. So incognito Jesus walks up and asks them what's going on. In verse 18, it said, they stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened in these days? What things? He asked. About Jesus of Nazareth, they replied. He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him, but we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. So Jesus finds them, and these 2 disciples are downcast. Of course they are. They've seen the man that they've been following killed. But it's more than just that. They'd seen the death of their expectations. I mean, look at verse 21. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. Could be some of the sadder words in Scripture. Can you hear the heartbreak there? Can you hear the pain of the unmet expectation? And every one of us has our own version of this. But we had hoped that the treatment would work. We had hoped that our child would come back. We had hoped that God would answer that prayer. We had hoped. And if you've ever whispered those words, then you already understand these disciples. You already know where they're at. I think the disciples struggled to recognize Jesus because of the power of their expectations. Now, expectations are a story that we begin telling ourselves about the future. And we all have them. We have expectations about our summer, about our jobs, about our families, about our relationships, about our relationship with God. And expectations aren't necessarily a bad thing. In fact, they can be helpful. Jess and I use them all the time with our 4-year-old daughter, Olivia. If we're going to go take her to the dentist, we will sit down and we will explain to her what's going to happen. We'll talk about the chair and the light, the cleaning, the x-rays. Why? Because when what happens matches what she expects, she's calmer. She's more prepared. She handles it so much better. When events match our expectations, we're calmer. We relax. Things are going as they're supposed to. But expectations have a downside. So this past week, Olivia got in her head that she needed to go to a candy shop. I don't know why she got that in her head, but she got in her head that she had to go to a candy shop. Instead, we took her to a brand new ice cream shop downtown. And the ice cream was amazing. And she had such a good time and she enjoyed it thoroughly. But as we're going home, and she realizes we're going home, all of a sudden it's not fine anymore. Now we're upset that we're not going to the candy shop. And she wasn't having a bad day. But the problem is that she was so focused on what she was expecting to happen that she couldn't continue enjoying what was actually had happened. She lost the joy of her ice cream because she couldn't stop thinking about candy. Now she's 4. So a lot of that is par for the course. A lot of that is very much expected. But it's amazing how often us adults, we do the exact same thing. We do it with our vacations. We do it with our careers, our marriages, our kids, with God. Sometimes our expectations become so powerful that they blind us to what's right in front of us. And I think that's exactly what's happening with these 2 disciples on the road to Emmaus. What was their expectation? They believed, as most of the disciples believed, that Jesus was going to come and Jesus was going to save them from Roman captivity. The Jews had been waiting for this for a long time. They had the expectation that Jesus was going to be a political savior. And it blinded them towards what Jesus was actually up to and what he was actually doing. And then when Jesus died, those unmet, unfulfilled expectations blinded them to what was happening even that very day. Listen to them talking about what was happening before they left Jerusalem in verse 22. And what's more, it is the 3rd day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early in the morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us that they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus. So they had all the evidence that something very unusual was happening. Yet what are they doing? They're heading out of town. Away from everything that's going on, away from everything that's happened. They are literally talking to the risen Jesus and don't even know it. The greatest danger for us isn't that God isn't working. It's that we can get so caught up in what we expect him to do that we miss out on what he's actually doing. And the incognito Jesus tells them exactly the same thing in verse 25. He said to them, "How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all the things that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. So Jesus is telling them, you got all the clues. All the signs were there. Everything was there for you to understand what was happening. It was all right in front of you. But sometimes our expectations become so loud that we can no longer hear what God is trying to say. So where do the expectations come from? They don't just come out of thin air. I think our expectations can blind us because we're so busy writing our own story that we miss out on the fact that God is writing a better story right in our midst. See, we begin writing our story in our minds of how our lives are supposed to go. This is how the summer will be. This is how my career will unfold. This is how my children will turn out. This is how God's going to act in my life in these situations. And without even realizing it, when we're writing that script, we then turn it over to God and ask him to play his role in it. I've been guilty of that quite often. I can spend weeks planning something, researching something, organizing something, imagining it, only then to realize, you know what? I have never actually asked God if that's what he wanted me to do. Last August, I was in New York City and I had an open day and I had a giant list of things that I wanted to see and wanted to do and wanted to get done. And I'm sitting in a coffee shop in the morning. And I'm planning this out and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to fit it all in. And I'm getting stressed out trying to figure out, well, this is here at this part, this is here, this is at this time. How am I going to get from here to here? And how am I going to get this back to there? I'm trying to work this all out. And I am getting stressed out over this. And as I'm contemplating all this, I felt like God prompting me. And he's like, hey, did you ever ask me what I want you to do with your day? That come up? That ever occur to you that maybe you should ask about that? No, it really hadn't. And it was just me handing God a script and asking him to act it out. And when we continue following our own script and asking God to act it out for us, that's when we can often find ourselves downcast, walking along the road, confused and disappointed. But what if the reason that this doesn't work for us isn't because God is against our plans? What if it isn't because God doesn't want good things for us? But what if the reason this doesn't work is because God is already in the process of writing an even better story for us? What if he's in the process of crafting an amazing and unexpected adventure for you? And he's just waiting and wanting for you to come to him so that he can show you the role that he's written for you. So as I'm sitting there in the New York coffee shop and I press pause on my planning for the morning, I said, all right, God, what do you want me to do for my day? And I felt him telling me, he said, be instead of do. God, that's not really specific. God, can you like pick a couple things? Like, can you point them out to me? Like, which ones do you want me to do? It's like, be instead of do. I'm like, all right, I got to figure out what this means. So as I'm praying through, I'm contemplating it. I was like, okay, why is he telling this? Well, everything I was planning on doing was all activities. It was requiring me to go the entire day. And maybe you've been there. Have you ever planned one of those vacations where you pack the schedule in so tight that you end up more tired at the end of your vacation than you did when you started it? And that's what I was trying to plan for myself. But instead, what I was figuring out was that God was calling me to a slower pace. So instead of doing all those things, instead I walked along the harbor and got great views of Manhattan and some of the parks there. Then I rented a bike and rode along the lower side of Manhattan in a dedicated bike lane at a leisurely pace, seeing and observing the city on a beautiful day. And at the end of the day, reading a book in a park sitting under a tree. And it was exactly the day that I needed. Exactly the rest my mind and my body needed. And it's also exactly the opposite of the story I was trying to write. But the whole time, God had a better one. I just needed to lean in to what he was saying. So we can often mistake our preferred future for God's promised future. And I almost missed out on an amazing day that God had for me because that's what I was doing. But here's the thing. God intervened. He didn't want me to miss out on the story he was writing. And that's exactly what Jesus does with these two disciples. He doesn't want them to miss out. He cared enough to come to two discouraged disciples while they were walking away. These guys might have been the first two people that Jesus revealed himself to. Two disciples that never get heard from before or since. And Jesus takes the time on the morning of the resurrection to come out to a specific road to meet with these two followers of Jesus who were headed down the wrong path, the wrong road. Now, eventually, Jesus reveals himself to them, and they're able to head back into Jerusalem. They're able to plug back into the story that Jesus was writing in the city at that time. And Jesus wants to do the same thing for you and for me this summer. He doesn't want you to miss out. He's got an amazing story that he's trying to write for you. The two disciples in verse 32, they asked each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked to us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?" See, after the fact, they were able to recognize the work of Jesus while they were in their lives, while they were walking down the road, but they only recognized it afterwards. Let's not wait until the summer is over to recognize and to see what Jesus is up to in our lives and in the world around us. What if instead we start the summer by checking in with God? What if we start the summer by asking God what he has in store for us? Here's a few questions that you can use to help you out in that process. Say, God, what story are you writing for me or for us this summer? Is there a story you have in mind? What story are you trying to write? Another question that you could ask, is there something, God, that you want us to lean into? Is there a specific thing you're doing? Is there a specific thing you're calling us, a specific story that you're saying, hey, here's something for you to get involved in. Here's something to check out. Here's something to pay attention to. Is there a question that you can ask there? Another one, is there something, God, that you want us to stop or to avoid? Is there something that we've been doing over this last series of our lives that you are inviting us to sit in and say, I'm going to stop that for this period of time? Is it an activity? Is it a behavior? Is it something else that you have going on that you say, I'm going to stop doing that for this season that God is calling you to? And lastly, let's bring him our expectations. Let's bring him our wants and our desires. God doesn't have a problem with us having wants, desires, and things we want. He just wants us to check those with him. So what are you hoping for? What are you wanting for your summer? Are there specific things that you have? There's nothing wrong with that. But let's take him to Jesus first and say, God, here's what I'm planning. Here's what I'm thinking about. Here's what I'm hoping for. Does that align with you? Is that kind of, are we tracking in the right direction, or are there some things that we need to adjust? All of these are great starting places if we want to make sure that our expectations are not preventing us from seeing what God has in store for us. So what if this summer we took a vacation from expectations to give us a new perspective on what story God may be writing for us this summer? If you want to respond to your connection card, you have a couple of options that you can look at there. One is, I will commit to seeking what God wants for me or for us this summer. And the other one is, I will remain open-handed with my wants, expectations, and desires. It's okay to have them, but can we be open-handed with them so that they're not blinding us towards what God may have in store for us, or the story he might be writing?
Thanks again for listening. Any step you take towards Jesus is a step in the right direction. You can find out more about us at crbic.org. That's crbic.org.